On April 17, 2023, high on Annapurna's north face, a climber prepared for what should have been the simplest moment of his entire expedition. One last descent, a short rappel, then a long familiar walk down toward oxygen, warmth, and the illusion of safety. At nearly 20,000 feet, the summit day was already over. The danger, at least on paper, was behind him. Anurag Maloo had spent 3 days above the altitude where human thinking slows and fine motor skills quietly disappear. His body was running on debt. His mind was operating through fog. Still, this moment felt routine. Clip in, lean back, go down. 3 seconds later, he was gone. No avalanche, no storm, no dramatic collapse of the mountain. Just a man slipping out of sight, swallowed by a vertical crack in the ice of the 10th highest mountain on Earth. Annapurna does not announce its verdicts. It simply takes what it is given. This is not a story about a reckless amateur wandering into danger blindly. It is about a disciplined professional, a man who trained, prepared, and believed deeply that he understood risk. It is about confidence earned too quickly, decisions made under oxygen-starved logic, and a mountain that has killed some of the most accomplished climbers in history without ever raising its voice. What happened next should not have happened. Not according to statistics, not according to medicine, not according to anyone who understands how the human body fails at extreme altitude. And yet, it did. Here on Ben's Stories, we don't chase hero worship or horror. We examine moments where human judgment meets indifferent terrain and we ask what survives that encounter. This is the story of Annapurna's death crack, and of a man who fell into it, and somehow came back. Anurag Maloo did not grow up in the shadow of mountains. He came from Kishangarh, a sun-baked city in Rajasthan, known for marble yards and trade routes, not ice falls or rope lines. His father dealt in stone. His mother managed the household. By every reasonable measure, Anurag's life was already stable, successful, and complete long before the Himalaya entered it. He was academically gifted, methodical by nature. 91% in mathematics, a degree in information technology. By his early 30s, he was managing regional operations for technology startups across Asia, airports, boardrooms, spreadsheets. A career built on control, predictability, and clean outcomes. Mountaineering did not fit that profile, but ambition has a way of hiding quietly until the right moment gives it permission. For Anurag, that moment arrived twice. The first was as a schoolboy, reading about Basendri Pal, the first Indian woman to stand on Everest. The second came decades later, in 2013, when he was selected as an Antarctic youth ambassador and joined an expedition to the southern continent. Antarctica has a way of stripping away distractions. When Anurag returned, he carried something back with him that no resume could reflect. Still, the dream slept. Until 2020. The COVID lockdown compressed the world into narrow streets and closed doors. Anurag started running to stay sane. 1 mile, then 5, then distances long enough to expose limits. His body changed, but more importantly, his tolerance for discomfort expanded. He enrolled in a basic mountaineering course in 2021. Then something rare happened. He was mentored by Basendri Pal herself, the woman whose story had planted the first seed decades earlier. Success followed quickly. Kanyatu none, Amadablam, technical terrain, exposed ridges, real consequences. By early 2023, Anurag had climbed over 10 peaks and traveled through more than 60 countries. He was not elite by Himalayan standards, but he was legitimate, competent, proven, and underneath all of it was something more personal. His grandmother had died less than 2 years earlier. He spoke of her often. Every summit felt like a conversation with her memory, a sense of protection that followed him upward. In the mountains, spiritual belief can be stabilizing. It can also quietly distort risk. When nothing bad happens long enough, success starts to feel earned rather than permitted. When Anurag announced his plan to climb all 14 8,000-meter peaks, most climbers expected him to start where others do Shoyu Manaslu, mountains that teach altitude without demanding payment up front. He chose Annapurna instead. Annapurna stands at 26,545 feet. It is statistically the deadliest major mountain on Earth. Roughly 1 in 3 climbers who reach the summit never return, not because it is technically the hardest but because it is structurally unstable. Avalanche exposure from base camp to summit, hanging ice cliffs. Slopes angled perfectly to fail without warning. Anurag understood this. He did not deny it. He believed confronting the hardest first would make everything else easier. It was a philosophy that worked in business. It had worked in training. It had worked on smaller mountains. Mountains, however, do not reward philosophy. He joined an expedition organized by 7 summit treks. The plan was the standard north face route. Camp systems, fixed lines, Sherpa support, everything correct on paper. Then he made one final decision that shifted the entire balance. He chose to climb without supplemental oxygen. Whether it was confidence, comparison, or internal pressure, no one can say. What matters is this. Above 26,000 feet, oxygen is not a convenience. It is cognition. It is judgment. It is the difference between noticing a detail and missing it completely. Annapurna does not forgive missing details. Acclimatization on an 8,000-meter mountain is a slow negotiation with biology. You climb, you retreat, you wait. You let your blood thicken, your lungs adapt, your brain relearn how to function with less. Rush the process, and the mountain collects interest later. Anurag followed the routine. Weeks of rotations between base camp and higher camps. Nights spent above 19,000 feet. Hours moving through terrain where every step had to be earned. By mid-April 2023, his body had adjusted as much as it was going to. The summit window opened. On the night of April 15th, he left camp for just before midnight. No oxygen. Headlamp cutting a narrow tunnel through the dark. Annapurna at night is quiet in a way that feels deliberate. Wind never fully stops. Snow never fully settles. The mountain is always rearranging itself while you move through it. Climbing without oxygen is not heroic. It is arithmetic. Your body operates at a fraction of normal capacity. Thoughts slow. Decisions take longer. Simple tasks require effort that feels out of proportion. Anurag had already been fighting a deep, chest-rattling cough for days. Up high, every cough steals oxygen you cannot replace. He kept moving. Hour after hour passed. The sun rose behind him, revealing the scale of what he was inside. Slopes dropping away into nothing. Ice cliffs overhead. No safe place to stop. By early afternoon on April 16th, Anurag reached approximately 26,000 feet, less than 500 feet below the summit. The top of Annapurna was visible, close enough to feel insulting, but something was wrong. He was moving poorly, slow, uncoordinated. His breathing had become a fight. His mind was slipping into the kind of fog that makes bad ideas feel reasonable. His lead guide, Chapal Sherpa, saw him on the upper slopes and recognized it immediately. Experience leaves little room for denial. Chapel got on the radio. The message was direct. If Anurag reached the summit late in the day, there would be no margin for descent. Darkness, exhaustion, avalanche terrain, no oxygen. The calculation was simple. Turn around. It is one of the hardest orders a climber can hear. 500 feet. After months of training, after weeks on the mountain, after choosing Annapurna specifically to prove something to himself, Anurag listened. Around 3 in the afternoon, he began descending. Another climber, Baljit passed him, still heading upward. She later described him as visibly disappointed and struggling with basic tasks. His hands were clumsy, his movements slow. At one point, he struggled to clip his own safety carabiner. At that altitude, that detail matters. By early evening, Anurag and his partner, Dawa Sherpa, reached camp for safely. 17 hours above 22,000 feet without oxygen. He was exhausted, but alive. That night, he slept believing the worst was behind him. The summit had been optional. Survival felt secured. The next morning, April 17th, he began his descent toward Camp 2 alongside Dawa and a Brazilian climber, Moises Fiamancini. Descending is when most accidents happen. Fatigue dulls focus, muscles shake, judgment lags half a second behind reality. Somewhere between Camp 3 and Camp 2, the route narrowed into a vertical section. Fixed ropes hung from an anchor point above a standard rappel. Routine, familiar. 3 ropes dangled down the ice. Moises went first. He checked his line, clipped in, descended cleanly. From below, he waited for Anurag to follow. When Moises looked up, his stomach dropped. Anurag was on the wrong rope. From below, Moises could see what Anurag could not. The rope he had clipped into was not a climbing rope. It was a cargo line used to haul equipment. No stopper, not at the end. No final safeguard. Moises shouted again and again. Anurag did not respond. Whether he heard and could not process it, or whether the fog had already closed in completely, no one knows. The rope slid through his device. Halfway down the face, it simply ended. Anurag Maloo fell. The first impact came quickly. Roughly 50 feet down, Anurag struck hard. Blue ice, the kind that has been compressed for centuries and offers no forgiveness. The force alone should have ended the story, but gravity was not finished. His body began sliding, uncontrolled, limbs no longer responding with intention. He crossed the slope and vanished over an edge that does not appear on most route diagrams, a fracture in the glacier that climbers refer to simply as a crevasse. This one opened like a wound in the mountain. Anurag dropped another 230 feet into darkness. From above, there was no sound, no movement, just a vertical void swallowing light. Moises and Dawa Sherpa scrambled to the edge, careful not to trigger what so often follows panic on Annapurna secondary avalanches. They leaned as far as they dared and shouted his name into the crack. Nothing came back. No echo. No answer. Just depth. This section of the route sits beneath unstable ice cliffs. Snow releases here without warning. Staying too long risks joining the person you are trying to help. They waited anyway. Minutes stretched, then longer. Finally, instinct and experience aligned on the same conclusion. They had to move. By the time they reached Camp 2, the radio call was already trembling. Anurag had fallen into a crevasse. Coordinates were approximate, depth unknown, survival unlikely. Within minutes, expedition leader Chapel Sherpa activated every protocol available: insurance, helicopter support, ground teams, technical gear, but Annapurna does not work on schedules. That evening, a helicopter attempted to reach the site. Clouds rolled in. Visibility collapsed. The pilot circled until fuel and altitude forced a retreat. The mountain closed its door. Overnight, snow fell. Avalanches ran. By morning, the crevasse's edges had softened, reshaped by new accumulation. On April 18th, Moises joined another flight, pointing from the air to where Anurag had vanished. They scanned the ice for color, movement, anything. They saw nothing. On the ground, Sherpa teams attempted to assemble a rope rescue. Standard climbing ropes measure around 200 feet. Anurag had fallen deeper than that. They requested more rope from higher camps. As the team approached the site, an avalanche released above them. They escaped narrowly. The message was clear. The mountain was still active. Specialized equipment was requested from Kathmandu: thermal cameras, carbon dioxide sensors, drones. Paperwork slowed everything. Weather windows closed. One day passed, then another. By April 19th, most expeditions had abandoned base camp. The season was ending. Annapurna grows quieter as climbers leave, but danger does not diminish. A small group remained: 5 Sherpas and 2 Polish climbers, Adam Bielecki and Mariah. Adam was not a casual addition. In 2018, he had climbed through winter darkness on Nanga Parbat to rescue a stranded climber in conditions most consider unworkable. If anyone could descend into a crevasse at altitude, it was him. By medical standards, there was no reason to continue searching. After 24 hours without food or water at 19,000 feet, organs begin to fail. After 48, survival becomes theoretical. After 72, textbooks stop using hopeful language. April 20th marked day 4. Before dawn, the remaining team assembled at base camp. Quiet, efficient, no unnecessary words. This was no longer a rescue in the emotional sense. It was a recovery. Adam did something small that morning that would matter more than anyone realized. He packed a rope that was 230 feet long. At first light, the helicopter lifted them toward Camp 2. The pilot set them down as close as altitude allowed. From there, it was a short walk to the crevasse. The crack was visible, now dark, vertical, indifferent. Ice screws went in. Anchors were built. A pulley system was assembled. Adam clipped in and stepped backward into space. Foot by foot, the rope fed through his hands. The beam of his headlamp carved a narrow column through the dark. At the bottom, something reflected yellow against blue. A suit. He descended the last meters and reached a body wedged between ice walls, curled on its side, partially covered in snow. Everything about the position suggested what they expected to find. Adam brushed snow away, and then he froze. The chest was moving, barely, slowly, but unmistakably. Adam leaned closer and opened Anurag's eyes. The pupils reacted, a blink, weak, but present. 72 hours, no food, no water. Extreme hypothermia, trapped at 19,600 feet. Anurag Maloo was alive. Adam keyed his radio. One sentence traveled up the rope. He's alive. He's alive. Extraction took more than an hour. There was no urgency in the movements, only precision. At that altitude, rushing kills people. Anurag's body was stiff, his limbs unresponsive, his breathing shallow and irregular. The rope system creaked under the combined weight of man and gravity as they inched him upward, centimeter by centimeter, out of the mountain that had kept him hidden for 3 days. When his body finally cleared the lip of the crevasse, a helicopter was already inbound. The pilot had been waiting, engines ready, knowing the weather window was fragile. As the aircraft lifted away from the glacier and turned toward Pokhara, clouds were already building behind it. Later, the pilot would say plainly that if they had arrived even 30 minutes later, no aircraft would have been able to land. Annapurna was closing again. At 11 a.m. on April 20th, the helicopter touched down at Manipal Teaching Hospital. Emergency staff rushed forward, cutting away Anurag's frozen suit. What they saw erased the hope that had filled the flight. His core temperature was too low to register. His skin was gray. There was no detectable heartbeat, no breathing. The medical team began CPR immediately. Chest compressions, medications, protocols followed exactly as written. Minutes passed, then more. Nothing changed. After 30 minutes, the decision was made that medicine requires in these situations. Anurag Maloo was pronounced dead on arrival. The compressions stopped. The room went quiet. Dr. Hashem Sabiti removed his gloves and walked to another room where Anurag's brother, Ashish Maloo, had been waiting since dawn. He recognized the outcome before a word was spoken. "I'm very sorry," the doctor said. "We did everything we could." Ashish did not accept it. "No?" he said. Dr. Sabiti began to explain hypothermia, cardiac arrest, oxygen deprivation facts that normally end conversations. Ashish interrupted him. His voice was calm, not desperate. "If he survived 72 hours in the mountain," he said, "how can you decide he is gone in 30 minutes? There was a pause. Then the doctor asked a question he had never asked before. "How long do you want us to continue?" 5 hours, Ashish said. Medical ethics do not usually bend to belief, but extreme hypothermia occupies a strange space in emergency medicine. There is a principle taught quietly to trauma physicians. You are not dead until you are warm and dead. Cold slows metabolism. It reduces oxygen demand. It can preserve organs long past the point where warmth would kill them. The team resumed CPR. 1 hour passed, then 2, 3. Staff rotated in and out, arms burning with fatigue. 4 hours passed. Dr. Sabeti would later admit that without Ashish's insistence, he would have stopped much earlier. At 4 hours and 5 minutes, something changed. A faint electrical trace appeared on the monitor. Then another. A heartbeat, weak but autonomous. Anurag drew a breath. The room went silent except for the sound of the monitor. What followed was not recovery, it was survival in its rawest form. His lungs were swollen, his kidneys had failed, his liver was damaged. Severe frostbite covered the entire right side of his body. Pressed against ice for 3 days, his feet had turned black. That evening, he was transferred by military helicopter to a higher capacity trauma center in Kathmandu. For 12 days, he remained in a coma, partly natural, partly induced. In early May, he opened his eyes. The first face he saw was his brother's. He remembered falling, nothing after. The mountain had taken the rest. Between May and September, Anurag underwent at least 7 major surgeries, amputations, skin grafts. Nearly half of his skin was replaced. But when doctors evaluated his neurological function, they found something no one expected. His brain was intact. No cognitive loss. No memory collapse. The cold that should have killed him had preserved him instead. He could think clearly. He knew who he was. He recognized his family. What his body had forgotten, however, was everything else. He had to relearn how to sit, how to stand, how to walk, how to hold a spoon, how to write his own name. For months, a tube in his throat kept him from speaking. On his 35th birthday, still in intensive care, he recorded a short voice message. Weak, hoarse. He called it his second birthday. Recovery took nearly 200 days. When he finally returned home to Rajasthan in November 2023, he could walk again. He could run briefly. His organs functioned normally. What surprised many was what did not follow. No nightmares, no panic, no hatred of the mountain. He did not call it trauma. He called it growth. Anurag Maloo does not speak about Annapurna with anger. He does not describe it as an enemy or a mistake. He speaks about it the way climbers sometimes speak about forces they do not fully understand, with restraint and a quiet sense of respect. He says the mountain kept him safe. That idea makes some people uncomfortable. We prefer clean explanations. Physics, probability, error. And all of those are present here. A wrong rope, oxygen-deprived judgment, a sequence of decisions that narrowed the margin until it disappeared. Remove any single element and this story ends where most Annapurna stories do, without a return. But remove any single coincidence, and it also ends there. A partner who noticed the rope and remembered the exact location. A crevasse shaped in a way that blocked wind rather than funneled it. A rescuer who carried a rope 30 feet longer than standard. A brother who refused to accept a death declaration and forced medicine to wait. None of these things were guaranteed. None of them were likely. Together, they were enough. Annapurna has taken legends without explanation. It has erased the strongest climbers of their generation in seconds. That it chose to release one man does not make it kind. It makes it consistent. The mountain does not judge intent. It responds only to exposure and time. There is a temptation, especially among experienced climbers, to believe that preparation creates immunity, that success accumulates protection, that confidence earned in smaller places transfers upward without distortion. Annapurna dismantles that belief quietly. It does not require recklessness. It requires only fatigue, thinning air, and one overlooked detail. Anurag plans to climb again. He says this without bravado, without denial. He understands now what the mountain gave him and what it nearly took away. Survival did not come from strength alone. It came from restraint, his decision to turn back in from others who acted when he no longer could. High-altitude climbing is often framed as a conquest, a summit as a verdict on worth. But the mountain does not measure achievement the way we do. It measures endurance, judgment, and timing. And sometimes, it measures luck. On Annapurna, reaching the summit is optional. Coming back alive is not. If stories like this matter to you, stories where survival is shaped not by spectacle, but by decisions, this is what Ben Stories exists to examine, not to glorify the mountain, not to romanticize the fall, but to understand the narrow space where humans sometimes pass through and return. Thank you for staying until the end.